Whoa, it's cold. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Now then, today I'm going to be replacing the brakes on my BMW E60 5 Series, and that's going to include the front and rear brake discs and also the front and rear pads. So I'm going to be overhauling the brakes completely. Now then, a company called Mtec actually sent me out a full set of their discs and pads. So this is what their discs look like. They are drilled and grooved and they are coated in black to prevent future rust, because as we know, as brake discs make contact with water, they do tend to rust quite a bit. So with them being coated black, obviously it's going to prevent that from doing so. And we also have their premium brake pads as well. And after looking at them, they do look pretty good quality. Obviously come with all the relevant clips and everything attached to them. So it'll be interesting to see how these perform after we've installed them. If you do, of course, want to purchase yourself any of these, I will leave the links in the description below. But without further ado, let's get outside and let's get installing these brakes. Okay then, so first thing you want to do is get the car up in the air. Make sure it's supported with some axle stands. I've got two at the front on the front subframe, and then two at the rear just below the rear subframe. And this is what the rear brake setup looks like, and this is the front brake setup. So we're going to start off on the front. Okay, then, so first thing is first we need to take this clip off at the front, which is really easy to remove. All you need to do is get a screwdriver in here, and that just pops out like so. There we go. Now then, because this has brake pad wear sensors, there should be one on the front brakes and then one on the rear brakes. There's not one for each caliper, there's only one for each side, because as you know, you should change your brakes in rears anyway. So in theory, if one side is worn, the other side should be worn just the same. So to remove the brake pad wear sensor from the front, it's actually held in by the bleed nipple. So you just need to take the cap off the bleed nipple, lift the line off there, and then it's actually, the wear sensor actually goes into the pad itself. Now I'm not going to attempt to just prise it out with the caliper still on, because I do plan on using these again. I do want to get another use out of them. If they're still fine and working fine, then I shouldn't need to replace these. If they are damaged or whatever, then I will go ahead and replace them, but for the time being I'm just going to leave them as they are. Next thing we need to do then is remove the calipers, which there is two bolts on the back for the slide pins, and you need a 7mm Allen socket to remove them. So let's get them off now. Okay then, so there should be a cap over the caliper slide pin, so you just need to pop that off. And like I said, it's a 7mm Allen socket, which I may need to get an extension on that. There we go. It might be quite tight, so don't think you're about to snap the bolt. There you go. And that's one out. And that's the other one out. And now then, what I'm going to do is disconnect the pad wear sensor from up here, just to give us a bit more room to move the caliper around. So with the two caliper bolts removed, you should in theory be able to remove the caliper away from the bracket, but because the pads are tight on the disc, we actually need to compress the piston back in. So I've got a clamp to do that, but before I go ahead and do that, I'm actually going to go ahead and take the cap off the brake fluid reservoir. And now that that's done, I can go ahead and push this piston back in. There we go, should be enough. And then the caliper can be removed. And then we can go ahead and remove the old brake pads, but obviously This one has the pad wear sensor connected to it, so I'm going to be careful and just try and pull it out like that. There we go. Took that out of the way, and just need to remove the other pad. There we go. That's the other pad out. And we can go ahead and hang this up here. And that's just hanged up there, out the way. Not any pressure on the brake line. You don't want to just hang the caliper by the brake line itself, because you will put stress on it. It is obviously only rubber, so you can end up splitting it. And now all that's left to do is remove the caliper bracket from the hub, and it's just held in by two 18mm bolts. So let's crack them off. And with these both undone, you can now remove the bracket itself. Now I'm also going to explain, for those of you who need to replace your pad wear sensor, maybe you have worn your pads down so much that the pad wear sensor itself is triggered. All you need to do is follow the line back. There's a box back here. You open up the box, clip it open, it unplugs, and the new one plugs in fairly easily. Now then, the next step was going to be removing the brake disc itself, but as you saw, the screw that holds the disc to the hub had to be drilled out, and that's because someone had rounded it off, probably used the wrong size socket and over tightened it into the hub. These screws are only to hold the disc on while you're removing the wheel from the hub. You don't need to over tighten these. Luckily I've got some spare, so we'll be using this when reinstalling the new disc. But now that the disc is off, it's now a case of cleaning up the hub, making sure that the wheel bearing is good, which it is, it's good enough. And yeah, like I said, cleaning up the hub and getting all this old grease off, and then applying a coat of new copper grease. And now that the hub's nice and clean, I'm just going to apply a good layer of grease. This is just to stop the new disc sticking to the hub. It's going to make it easier when you have to remove it next time. Now if you have regular brake discs that aren't coated, like mine are coated black, then they'll likely be covered in a grease which needs to be removed. It's basically just on there just to stop them rusting during transport, and all you need to do is just spray some brake cleaner and then give it a wipe off. And now I'm just going to line the disc up with the hub, and I'm actually going to put a wheel bolt in just to keep everything in line, and then I'll put the locating screw in after, with some copper grease on as well. Just got the Allen key, and that's plenty tight enough. Now the next thing to do is reinstall the bracket with these two 18mm bolts. There we go, and that's the bracket on. And now what we need to do now is get the pads ready to go back into the caliper. So we need to apply grease to any area of the pad that makes contact with the caliper. So it's going to be around here, because that's where it makes contact with the piston. and then also on the ends as well, because that's where it makes contact with the caliper bracket. And I'm also just going to put a little bit on the end of these clips just to have it slide into the caliper a little bit easier. And we're going to go ahead and put the piston side pad in first, and this also needs to have the brake pad wear sensor in as well, so I'm going to try and put this in first and then slide the wear sensor in after. There we go, that's the wear sensor in, and now we just need to put this pad in, which goes in like that. And now this can just sit over the disc. There we go. And now we just need to put the 2 slide bolts in at the back. It's also worth covering these in grease as well, just to make sure that they're sliding properly in their boots. And it's also to note as well that on the fronts on these there is a shorter bolt and a longer one. The longer one, I believe, goes at the bottom, and then the short one goes at the top. And now that those 2 bolts are tightened up, I'm going to go ahead and position the brake pad wear sensor where it's supposed to go. This goes over the bleed nipple like that. Let's put the cap back on. Go, and then let's slide this back in here. There we go. Oh, there's also this brake line as well, and then it's just this clip that needs to go on then, which these are easy to remove but not so easy to refit. So you have to get either end behind the caliper like so. And then without that springing out, this needs to be levered forward and into position like that. There we go, job done. Now then, onto the rears. Now they are pretty much the same for the most part. There are only just a few differences. One of them being with the clip, that's different, and where the pad is in the caliper, you don't have to actually put the front pad into the caliper, you can just leave it in the bracket. I'll show you when we get to it, but first of all you need to go ahead and remove this clip, which you can generally do with just prise it from the back, and it should spring out like that, and then we can get started on the caliper slide bolts. But before that, I'm going to go ahead and compress the piston back in. That should do it. It's going to be lifted up. He says, there we go. Let's take this pad out. And as I said, this pad, this just sits in the bracket itself. There's actually nothing that can keep it in the caliper, so it just sits in the bracket like that. So it can just be removed now. Let's hang this out of the way, and let's get the bracket off. And that's the bracket off. Now then, here's another reason why the rears are slightly different. So if you remove this screw, the securing screw that holds the disc onto the hub, you may not then be able to remove the disc, because, as you may know, there is shoes on the inside of this brake disc that are used for the handbrake. So bearing in mind my handbrake is off, if the handbrake is tight, then the shoes may be pushing against the brake pads. So if your disc is hard to come off, if it's not coming off straight away, Do not try and force it, because you may end up damaging the shoes inside of this, which control the handbrake. But I'm pretty sure mine is a little bit loose, because I have the handbrake off and my handbrake is pretty slack as it is, so it will need adjusting at some point. But let's take the screw out, and then yeah, see, if it's not coming off with a wiggle like that, then honestly do not try and force it off. But with that off, with the disc off, we can now clean up this hub and apply some more grease. But as I was saying, with the handbrake shoes, this is them right here, so if the handbrake is tight, these will be pushing against the inside of the disc. Now, if you cannot get the disc off easily, there is actually a cog at the bottom which you have to rotate. That will bring the shoes in and away from the edges of the disc. Go. Now the new disc's on, we're going to put the locating screw in. I'm just going to give it a little, that's it, that's more than tight enough. And so with the disc on, I've actually went ahead and reinstalled the bracket with the two 18mm bolts. And now I can fit the new pads into the caliper. So it goes this way around, just goes in there. And this pad sits in the bracket like that. And there we go. Just got to put the two slide pins in now. Covered in grease. And with the caliper back on, I can put this clip back on then, which these two pieces have to go on the outside, and then it goes in like that. Job done. So now that this side is completed, I'm going to go ahead and tackle the other side, and it's as if by magic this side is done as well. And now that the wheels are back on, the car is on the ground, it's time to take for a test drive. Okay then, so just got back from a nice long test drive then, and first of all, like as soon as I, pretty much left my house, I was like pushing the brake pedal down, and I thought there was like something massively wrong with with the way that I've installed them, because I was pushing the brake pedal down and I got no stopping power at all. It was just pretty much going all the way to the floor, and like nothing was happening. But then I remembered, obviously, these are coated discs, so the top layer, the coated layer has to wear off before the pad can make a good contact with the discs. And this was true, once I had pushed the brake pedal a whole bunch of times, the stopping power did, increase, it did get better. And I'm pretty sure like all of the coated layer on the actual pad surface on the discs has like worn off now. But yeah, with regards to the braking performance, when I actually got to the brake biting point, when the pads actually make contact with the discs, it was actually really good. I was impressed with it. It seems to stop a lot firmer now, and it definitely seemed better than my previous brake setup. I'm sure I had like padded discs and pads on the front. I don't even know what was on the rear. It could have been like some cheap Chinese ones. But the Mtec discs and pads do seem a whole lot better. One thing I do want to mention though is there seems to be a whole lot of brake pedal travel. It's like really excessive. So I'm thinking that I need to do a brake fluid flush. Now this was actually like this before I installed the new brakes as well. It's not like since I've installed the new ones. It's been like this since I ever bought the car. So I think it's in desperate need of a brake fluid flush, so I'm going to do that sometime soon. And I'll probably go ahead and upgrade the brake lines as well, like to some braided lines or something, because I will actually be taking this car on track this year. I do plan to go to the Nürburgring, but that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother time. That's going to be some good fun. But yeah, in terms of the actual performance of the discs and pads, I am pleased with it. Like I said, I do need to get around to doing a brake fluid flush sometime, just so I can have the biting point, you know, straight away when I push the brake pedal. But yeah, other than that, I'm pretty pleased with them. And oh, how good do they look as well? How good do these discs and pads look? Like, once the coating has worn off the pad contact area on the discs, like, these discs look so good. I'm a massive fan of the drilled and grooved brake discs. They look so much better than just the solid, you know, flat ones. But yeah, I am a massive fan of these brakes, and they should do me well. They should last me a long time. So I want to thank you guys for watching. Please give this video a like, leave a comment down below, subscribe if you have not already done so, and I will see you guys in that next video. Peace!